2:37 a.m. in the Strait of Hormuz. A Mason operator yells, "Fast mover, bearing 0, 9er, 5. A high-speed contact just streaked off the Iranian coast, then completely dropped off radar. No explosion, no course correction. It just disappeared. 7 seconds later, the CIC bathed in the blinding red glare of the Aegis combat system. Hundreds of signals lit up at once, drones skimming the waves. IRGC attack boats ripped through the dark. Missile lock alarms screamed across the ship. Here in the Middle East's narrowest choke point, 60 seconds is all it takes to ignite a global crisis. The Strait of Hormuz wasn't a shipping lane anymore. It was a total death zone. This choke point is the ultimate stronghold for the IRGC, the absolute final shield guarding Tehran's southern coast. Slicing the dark are 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers, the USS Mason, Truxtun, and McFall. These warships are operating under a brittle ceasefire that is practically crumbling. Iran's Navy just launched their ambush. A massive swarm of low-flying Hessa-built Shahed drones and blazing fast Siraj-1 Mosquito boats poured out from the cliffs. They swarmed from every angle, using the jagged coastline to hide their radar signatures. The whole play was to overwhelm the American fleet, bleeding their interceptor missiles dry right away. 2:40 a.m. The Aegis combat platforms on all 3 ships flipped from standby to active kill mode. Hooked into the combat coordination network, the 3 destroyers became one living organism. Out here in the kill box, those 3 Arleigh Burke destroyers don't fight as lone wolves. They share crystal-clear sensor data in real time. If the Mason's Spy-1 radar paints a drone on the horizon, the Truxtun and McFall see it instantly, and they will pull the trigger. The network guarantees 0 missed targets and not a single wasted round. The trap slammed shut, but Iran just invited a digital apex predator right into their living room. 2:42 a.m. The Iranian assault turns vicious. Enemy commanders unleash a saturation strike, trying to blind the American fleet with sheer volume. Dozens more Shahed drones dropped to barely 10 feet above the waves, running dead silent. They cut all active radar emissions, flying strictly on pre-programmed GPS to slip right past standard electronic jamming. Meanwhile, Siraj-1 Mosquito boats throttled up to 60 knots, weaving in crazy zigzag patterns to flood the destroyer's radar screens with massive clutter. Inside the Mason CIC, the air smells like burnt ozone and pure adrenaline. The captain makes a gut-check call: hold the SM-6. Keep the top-tier interceptors in their tubes. Instead, the crew unleashes a total wall of steel. ESSM missiles erupted from the Mark 41 vertical tubes, ripping a fiery wall through the low-flying drones before they could even get close. These medium-range interceptors are tailor-made to absolutely shred fast, low-flying threats. Right then, the USS Truxtun launched the Naval Strike Missile, a 5th-gen stealth cruise weapon built by Kongsberg and Raytheon. It skimmed inches above the ocean to obliterate the Siraj-1 boats before they ever hit RPG range. The chaos peaked at 2:44 a.m. That's when Iran's aerospace force screwed up. Trying to guide the second wave of cruise missiles, they powered up a 3rd Khordad battery stashed on a nearby island. The second that Khordad radar pinged, it lit up like a massive flashlight in a pitch-black room. The Navy's counterpunch was instant, and it was devastating. They fired an SM-6 in anti-radiation mode. Screaming through the air at Mach 3.5, the SM-6 slammed straight into the enemy radar. The Iranian operators couldn't even reach the dial to switch frequencies. That million-dollar missile smashed the Khordad's array, instantly turning their fancy tech into a smoking crater of twisted steel. The message was brutally simple. Transmit and you die. 2:45 a.m. As the surface war raged, the chaos took to the skies. Out of a forward base in the UAE, two Sikorsky MH-60 Romeo Seahawk choppers, packed with Lockheed Martin gear, roared into the fight. Hugging the deck, they flew low to dodge under Iran's long-range radar. Up in the sky, Seahawks operate as the essential eyes and ears for the Aegis fleet. The helicopters run the advanced APS radar. It is a multi-mode radar built to track fast targets like Siraj 1 speedboats cutting through rough waves. That intel is not just for the pilots. It streams right to the destroyers through the Link 16 network. This builds a high-resolution map, stripping away the IRGC's coastal terrain cover. Relying on infrared gun turrets, the Seahawk crew locked onto the Iranian fleet. 2:47 a.m., the Seahawks launched a surgical strike. They fired Hellfire missiles and laser-guided APKWS rockets. Pinpoint strikes turned those Mosquito boats into pillars of fire, but the IRGC in the Strait of Hormuz was not done yet. Deeper inland, another third Khordad battery fired a Tier 2B surface-to-air missile right at the lead Seahawk. The cockpit instantly lit up with rapid missile launch warnings. The pilot yanked the stick hard. The Seahawk ripped into a violent, sharp turn, dumping a massive cloud of magnesium heat decoys. That Iranian missile streaked right past, exploding harmlessly in the salt-laden air. That close call proved just how brutal this fight was. Yet the Seahawk crews held their ground, refusing to budge. Sensors stayed locked on targets. They refused to yield the airspace, continuing to direct destroyer fire and sweeping away the remaining Iranian naval assets. 2:50 a.m. The momentum shifted hard when the IRGC unleashed its most potent asymmetric weapon. Using mobile platforms along the coast, Iran deployed the heavy Cobra 58 electronic warfare system. This was not your standard jamming. It created a massive electronic bubble, built to completely blind the X and S bands used by U.S. sensors. The Cobra 58 is an indigenous Iranian electronic attack network. It linked with remaining 3rd Khordad batteries, creating a high-intensity interference field. It started wiping the U.S. fleet's radar screens completely clean. The impact hit instantly. Over the radio, the lead Seahawk pilot called out a total sensor blind condition. The chopper's advanced radar, which minutes earlier had guided fire with surgical precision. Now it struggled to tell real targets apart from a massive wall of electronic white noise. Inside the fog, the IRGC took their chance. A low, observable suicide drone slipped right through a jamming blind spot. It broke the outer defense layers of the USS Truckin. The ship's Phalanx CIWS shredded the drone at the very last second, but the kinetic blast rained high-velocity shrapnel down on the Tructon's upper structure. The blast damaged the SPQ-9B radar antenna, knocking it offline. 2:52 a.m. fleet tension reached a true boiling point. The USS Tructon was forced into a reduced sensor mode while fire crews rushed the deck. Up in the chopper, cockpit lights rapidly flashed amber as a 3rd Khordad missile, continuously tracked by the Cobra system, streaked past. It narrowly missed the chopper's fuselage by just a few meters. To survive, the pilot executed a violent emergency dive, dumping every single remaining heat decoy. For the first time since this nightmare started, the U.S. Navy was playing defense. They struggled to keep situational awareness against a relentless enemy. An enemy that turned the electromagnetic spectrum into a weaponized fog. 2:55 a.m. Just as the IRGC prepped a coordinated assault on the Tructon, the U.S. Navy slammed down its trump card. A high-speed suicide boat, loaded with explosives, ripped out of the darkness. Barreling straight for the USS starboard side at 50 knots, standard guns completely failed to track it through the heavy jamming. But the USS Mason carried Helios, a 60-kilowatt directed energy weapon built by Lockheed Martin. An invisible, high-energy laser beam sliced across the water. 3 seconds later, the US-5 lost total control and erupted into a fireball. In exactly 3 seconds, extreme heat melted the engine block and ignited the fuel. It turned a deadly threat into a harmless fireball before touching the hull. But the ultimate weapon was only just starting to reveal itself. The captain authorized SEWIP Block 3, an advanced electronic attack system built by Northrop Grumman. Forget standard jammers that just flood the electromagnetic spectrum with noise. SEWIP Block 3 unleashed a total cyber-electronic strike. It hijacked the Cobra 5 signals and pumped highly realistic, malicious data straight back into Iran's command network. 2:58 a.m. The deception is flawless. Ghost targets suddenly swarm across Iranian radar screens. Dozens of massive U.S. warships charging hard toward their coastline. Tricked by the digital phantoms, IRGC operators redirected every last Cobra 5-8 and 3rd Cordad missile to hunt down ghosts. While the Iranians dumped their absolute final salvos into thin air, SEWIP quietly scrubbed the Link 16 data stream for the U.S. Navy. Electronic fog lifted. The enemy completely distracted by decoys. Destroyers and Seahawk choppers finally got a clear tactical picture. A ruthless counterstrike. SM-6 missiles in anti-radiation mode and Seahawk Hellfires launched at the exact same time. They locked onto the active radar emissions of the Cobra 5-8 and 3rd Cordo batteries with deadly precision. Inside 60 seconds, Iran's jamming and air defenses were systematically wiped out. The electronic bubble shattered, leaving the IRGC's final forces blinded, disoriented, and exposed in the dark. While Mason used SEWIP to blind the enemy, the USS McFall fired a final salvo of ESSMs, crushing the remaining coastal artillery. This violently cleared a path for the Seahawks to close in. The destroyers pushed through. 3:05 a.m. The collapsed electronic bubble and the ruined 3rd Cordad's main artillery batteries ripped a temporary hole right in their defense network. Inside the USS Mason CIC, the Aegis combat system merged satellite intel with live thermal feeds from the Seahawks. They found a black corridor, a massive tactical blind spot, a 4-mile-wide gap in the IRGC radar network where blown sensors left a vulnerability. That corridor was the only path for a killer strike before Iran could shift its mobile reserves. This attack window was dangerously tight, less than 12 seconds. 3:07 a.m., the U.S. fleet strikes hard. SM-6 missiles, already screaming down from high orbit, were redirected through Link 16 to plunge straight down that dark corridor. At the same time, Seahawks unleashed their final Lockheed Martin AGM-114 Hellfires, dead set on the IRGC's last surviving coastal command bunkers. The timing, absolutely flawless. The SM-6s, screaming in at extreme speeds, hit like falling stars, vaporizing the IRGC's regional headquarters, while those Hellfires wiped out the final Siraj 1 docks. 3:15 a.m. The IRGC Navy's remaining force suffered a total structural collapse. Surviving Mosquito boats fled blind into the coastal fog, their chain of command totally severed. 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the Mason, Truxtun, and McFall, finished their dangerous transit through the Strait of Hormuz with hulls intact and sensors fully online. This wasn't just some crude shootout. It was a high-speed battle of adaptation. Iran spent years building a digital fortress to block the critical Strait of Hormuz. The U.S. Navy just rewrote the lock's code mid-battle. But you have to ask, what if the digital deception failed? What if the Sea-Whip Block 3 system hadn't been there to slice through that electromagnetic fog? What if a single Iranian anti-ship missile struck a massive oil tanker instead of a warship? We'd wake up to a terrifying new reality. The Strait of Hormuz pumps the global economy's lifeblood. A single burning ship in those narrow waters could spook marine insurers into freezing every shipping operation. That effectively paralyzes global trade overnight. Crude prices would violently skyrocket, supply chains utterly crushed overnight, and the nightmare of a full-scale, uncontrollable regional war would become dead-on reality. In modern naval warfare, the line between a routine patrol and a global recession, just 60 seconds of ruthless high-tech precision.